Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jeremy, and I'll be leading these Monday night sessions this month. So probably many of you have been to these before, but the purpose of these Monday night sessions is to explore some of the basic Buddhist ideas and practices. And the sessions are meant to be fairly relaxed, and so you're encouraged to ask questions as we go through. And we'll do some meditation, and I'll talk a little bit, and we'll have question and answer. So we'll start off by doing some meditation just to calm our minds down after a busy day. So as you may be aware, the purpose of concentration meditation is to focus your mind on a single neutral object, and the purpose of that is to familiarize your mind with being still or being stabilizing on one mental object. And so this has the benefit of stopping your mind from constantly jumping from one mental object to the other, and has the effect of making your mind more peaceful. And when you find that when you can focus your mind on one object, then you feel your mind feels peaceful and calm, and also your body feels more relaxed. So that in itself is a very useful practice. So we'll do some of that now. And we'll also do a short visualization. So visualization is also a form of concentration meditation, but we use imagery to familiarize our mind with an idea. For example, familiarize our mind with the idea of compassion. So we'll do that for about 15 minutes or so. And I'll just talk as we go through and see how you go. Mm-hmm. So firstly, just relax your body and get into a comfortable posture. It's usually helpful to have your back straight to keep your mind alert. And also usually helpful to have your eyes mostly closed to stop distraction and to turn your attention inward towards your mind. And also to keep your eyes slightly open so there's some light coming through, which helps to keep you alert, stops you from falling asleep. So just check that your body is relaxed, and then bring your attention to your breath and observe your breath moving in and out. So the idea is to stop thinking of all the things that we have been thinking about all day, and just try to focus your mind on the breath without letting it wander. So we do this in a relaxed way without using a lot of force. So your mind remains relaxed and spacious, and you're placing your concentration on that point. It can be helpful to focus on the point under the tip of your nose, on the sensation of the breath moving in and out. So we try to keep our mind alert, but also focused. And as soon as our mind starts to wander, then we bring it back to that point of concentration. So try to keep your mind on that point for the duration of 9 breaths. So count to 9 breaths. Breathing in and out is 1 breath. So after 9 breaths, check to see whether your mind has wandered off and bring it back to the point of concentration. And again, see if you can keep it placed on the breath for a duration of 9 breaths. Then again, check your concentration and return your concentration to that point. So we use mindfulness to observe the mind to see whether it has wandered off. And we use alertness to return the concentration to that point. So mindfulness is keeping the object in mind, which is the breath. And alertness is observing the mind to see whether it has wandered and then bringing it back. So we use those two faculties to keep the concentration placed on that object. So again, try to place your mind for the duration of 9 breaths, keeping your mind relaxed and clear and alert. And again, at the end of 9 breaths, just check your concentration. And now we'll do a visualization. So visualize that as you're breathing in, imagine that you're breathing in white or golden light, and that this light is completely filling your body and mind. And you imagine that this is filling you with enlightened energy of wisdom and compassion, so particularly wisdom and compassion. So these are two main qualities of an enlightened being. And then visualize that as you're breathing out, you're expelling any problems or negativities, any afflictive emotions, any particular thing that's bothering you at the moment, that you're expelling that. So this is like a purification visualization. So just do that for a few moments. So you feel that the light is completely pervading your entire body and mind. And filling you with this kind of blissful energy of wisdom and compassion. And you're breathing out this dark light or smoke and feeling that you're completely expelling any problems or negativities or afflictive emotions. So feel that they're completely expelled or removed. So there's something particular that's bothering you, for example, stress or anger, then you can focus on that. Imagine you're completely removing that particular problem. So then you feel that you've achieved this enlightened state, completely embodying this wisdom and compassion energy. And then you visualize that you radiate out light from your heart, and it goes out to all other living beings, including humans and animals. And you visualize that this light also completely fills their body and mind, and fills them also with this enlightened energy, this blissful wisdom and compassion. So you just focus your mind on that visualization for a few minutes. So you try to include as many beings as possible in your visualization. And also the people that you don't like, the people who cause you problems. So you end the meditation by visualizing that all beings have achieved this enlightened state, completely free of problems and completely filled with this enlightened energy. And then you visualize that the light withdraws back into your heart. And then you end the meditation there. Or you can stay in meditation if you want to. It looks like some of you want to keep meditating. Okay, so that's an example of a concentration meditation and a simple visualization. And you can see how visualization is an effective way of familiarizing your mind with a attitude, state of mind, like compassion, and just visualizing that you're giving something to others familiarizes your mind with that attitude of wanting to give to others and help others, and I think it makes it easier to do in practice. So any comments or questions about that meditation before we move on? Yes? Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of these visualizations relate to more advanced visualizations that you do later on. And so there's said to be a particular purpose of visualizing light going out and then withdrawing it back. And it's to do with the, I guess you'd say, the subtle energies in our body and mind. And there's certain yogic practices you do which involve using those energies. And so it's said to be better to withdraw it back into your... Maybe you can experiment with that and see, whether it feels better to withdraw it back. Did you feel like that was a comfortable thing to do, or did that feel strange to do it? Or you're just wondering why? Oh, okay, right, yeah. Yeah. So I think the idea is that you fill all beings with this kind of blissful energy, so they don't need any more. They've got enough. So then you can, your job's done. So yes, I think that's the idea. It's sort of ending it too, I think, ending the practice. Yeah. But these are things that we can, I think, experiment with, these kind of visualizations and practices. And there's many different practices you can do, and encouraged to try different practices and see which works better for you and which doesn't. Yeah. So, in the newsletter I went out on a limb and mentioned that we can think of Buddhism as a science of happiness, which is, I think, possibly a little bit controversial, maybe not, I'm not sure. But I just wanted to emphasize this tradition or aspect of Buddhist practice which is focused on reason and analysis, and is in many ways a scientific approach. And by scientific I just mean that the idea is that we formulate a hypothesis. For example, focusing your mind on one neutral object makes your mind peaceful. So that's like a hypothesis that we can test. So then we test that through doing practice, and the idea is not to take someone's word for it. If you meditate on one object that it's going to make your mind peaceful, you have to put that into practice and try it out and see whether it works. So I guess it's a scientific process, but it's one that we have to investigate using the first-person observer. So it's different to physical sciences in that we may not have any external evidence or facts that we can present, so we have to sort of prove it to ourselves. So it's a kind of unique science in that way. But still an entirely valid approach, I would say. There's a famous quote from the Buddha which you may have heard, which is, he said when he was teaching to his students that he asked them not to accept what he said just out of respect for him, because he has the name Buddha and he's widely renowned as a teacher. So he's saying, in the same way as a goldsmith would test gold before they buy it by cutting it and rubbing it and burning it, which is, I guess, what you did in ancient India before you bought gold. And so he's saying, in the same way as a goldsmith does that before buying the gold, you should also test what I'm saying thoroughly before you accept it. So really, that's an invitation to test these ideas thoroughly. So we're not expected to believe anything just because the Buddha said it. And in fact, he's encouraging us not to do that. So it would be better to be much more skeptical about these ideas and challenge them before you accept them. So I think that's an interesting idea and an approach that I would encourage you to take when you're investigating spiritual practice. To be skeptical and to investigate things thoroughly. And it's an approach that the Dalai Lama also emphasizes. He encourages people. He even says, Buddhism might not be for you. You should. I'm not trying to convert everyone to Buddhism. It may not suit everyone. And so he also encourages this kind of skeptical analysis. So I think that kind of takes the pressure off us in a way, because you might walk into a tradition like Buddhism and you're confronted by a lot of things which seem strange. For example, the paintings and the statues, and you see people bowing and things like that. And, they may seem like strange practices that you can't really relate to. But you have that freedom to not adopt them. It's not like you have to adopt them at all. There's no kind of pressure on you to do that. So, as the Dalai Lama often says, if there's something in this tradition which you find useful, then please take it and use it in a way that's helpful for you. If there's other things which you find strange, or don't make sense to you, they seem irrational, then you can just put them aside and don't feel any pressure to adopt them. So I think this is a really useful approach, and I would encourage you to take that approach. I guess it's also in the Catholic tradition they have the devil's advocate. I heard recently that there was a department in the Vatican called the devil's advocate. It was, I forget the Italian name, Diablo or something. So there was a department. So their job was to challenge everything. So it's a similar, I think, in the Buddhist tradition and in other spiritual traditions where they have this devil's advocate, or someone whose job it is to challenge these ideas. And it's a very useful way of learning about things, about anything, but particularly about spiritual practice. So there's a long tradition of dialectics or debate in Buddhism and also in Hinduism, similar to the ancient Greek dialectic tradition. So it's people arguing back and forth and testing their ideas on each other. And so these traditions of debate and logical analysis go back thousands of years. And there's famous stories about famous debates that happened, during the Buddha's time. And they were like, even historical events where two great spiritual leaders would meet and debate. And apparently at that time, if one person won the debate, then all the followers of that person would have to convert over to the winner of the debate. So it was a very big deal. And the debates would go on for days and weeks, apparently. There's one funny story about one master who was, because often they're quite sort of antagonistic, these debates, and they're trying to upset the opponent and show them that their mind is weak or something like that. And so there was one master who was told that he announced that he's coming to debate with one group, and he hung out outside the monastery gates, and when the monks came back from begging for alms, he like slapping each monk on the back of the head, saying 1 bald head, 2 bald heads, just trying to rile them up. And then he was saying, where does this bald head come from as they go through? And then this other master who was there who'd come to debate him, he was like the last monk that walked in. And when he said, where does this bald head come from? He said, from my neck. And so then this master thought, oh, that's a good answer. So then he thought, okay, I've got an opponent here. And then they started their debate, which went on for weeks. And then I forget the outcome. I think one group had to convert to the other group or something. So it was a big deal. So there's that kind of commitment to dialectic and debate, and you'll see even in the monastic institutions today, there's this. They spend hours each day debating what they've learnt, from the texts. And you can ask any question. You can challenge your opponent. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is because I think it's often a not known fact about spiritual traditions like Buddhism, that there is this emphasis on rationality and on investigation. And people tend to think of religion as accepting blindly things that are irrational. So I just wanted to make that point. Any questions about that? You're probably familiar with that tradition? So you feel free to attack anything I say.
Is there a point where skepticism is kind of, you become so skeptical that you just completely disable yourself and can't believe anything?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I guess you could make a distinction between being skeptical and being closed-minded. So I guess skepticism is sort of having an open mind that things could be possible. Like, I don't know everything. There's probably a lot of things that I don't know, but I'm not going to believe them until there's good reason to believe them. So it's sort of like having an open mind, but a skeptical mind at the same time. Yeah. So I guess a closed mind would just be where you decide that something is not true. You reject it without considering that it might be true, or without considering the reasons why it might be true. Yeah. Okay. So, if we were to take a scientific approach to looking for happiness, so how would we do that? And people have been doing that for thousands of years. So, if you think about that for a minute, and it's probably something we've been doing all of our lives already. We've been looking for happiness in various ways, trying various things. So if you think of all the things that you've tried to be happy, all the, whether it be some sort of long-term happiness from a career or a relationship, or buying a house, or something short-term, like eating food or going to your favourite cafe or whatever. So these are all the kind of things that we try. And we have, I think, varying degrees of success. Sometimes they bring the happiness that we expected, and other times they don't. We're disappointed. So one way we could divide all those different types of or objects that we're looking for happiness in is internal and external. So when I say external, I mean anything that's external to the mind. So that includes, physical objects and people, and also all the sense objects, sound, taste, tactile, smell. What did I miss? Sight, thank you. Visual, form. So they're all external. And so that's one distinction we could make, and that's an important distinction which is made in spiritual traditions like Buddhism. So Buddhism asserts that the external objects are not a guaranteed source of happiness. So we can treat that as a hypothesis that we need to test. So if a spiritual teacher says that these external things are not going to bring you true happiness. So then how would we test that kind of hypothesis? Because it's the appearance is that things, external things, do bring some happiness. You know, like you eat a delicious apple, you bite into it, and you taste delicious, and you feel happiness. So you think, I got happiness from that object. So that's an external thing bringing me happiness. So that's how things appear. But then on the other hand, sometimes that eating apple is not going to bring happiness. You know, for example, if your mind is disturbed and you eat an apple, you may not get any happiness from that apple, from that delicious taste. So we can see that so we need to analyze in this way our experience. So the Buddhist tradition is saying that the external objects are not a true source of happiness because they're not directly connected to the mind. There's a sort of there's not a direct connection. So, and the argument is that the material objects, because the mind is a non-material thing, a mental thing. So the argument that the Buddhists present is that the cause of happiness must also be a non-material thing. So again, that's an idea I think we need to check up. What do you think? Does it make sense to you that a material thing can't cause a non-material happiness? Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, in some ways I can see the logic behind that. You know, I can sort of see how happiness is something I'm experiencing in my mind. So, a material thing, you know, like an apple, can't act as the primary cause for that happiness. Any thoughts on that? Yes.
I guess to me it seems logical that the apple is out there.
Yeah.
And the happiness I feel is not outside, it's inside.
Yes.
So it makes sense to me that the thing that's outside can't be the direct cause.
It makes sense, yeah.
Because it's external and like the feeling when you feel that it's right outside of that.
Yeah.
From that
Mm. Yeah. So I think that's the idea. Yes, sorry, what were you going to say? Oh, so repeat that, yeah. So Ingrid was saying that it makes sense to her that because the happiness is something you experience in your mind and the material object is external, that it makes sense to you that there's this disconnect between those two things. Mm. So anyway, sorry, you had a comment, question?
I would just say external objects also deteriorate, like houses crumble, people die, nothing's sort of ongoing forever. It's all very temporary.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's another point which is often made in Buddhism, is that the external objects are not something that we can place complete trust in because they are impermanent and they're changing and they're not going to last forever. But not only that they don't last forever, but the way they appear to our mind is also constantly changing. So something that you have strong desire for like a person, for example, and then that person that you're strongly desiring can change the way they appear to your mind. Or, you know, like shopper's remorse, where you buy some nice shoes and then you get home and you don't like them anymore. So the thing is, the way it appeared to your mind in the shop is something really beautiful and you're happy to hand your money over, and then you get home and the way it appears to your mind is completely changed. You don't like them anymore. So they're also impermanent in that way, in the way that they appear. So this is another reason why external objects are, the idea of seeking them or seeing them as a reliable source of happiness is challenged because they're being impermanent. And also because there is that disconnect. So another way of proving that there's not a direct connection between the object and the state of happiness is that, as I said, not every time you experience the external object you feel that same happiness. So if there was a direct connection, then when you eat the apple, then you should always feel happy. And also, if you eat more apple, then you should feel more happy. But we don't experience that. In fact, we experience the opposite. So the more we do things, they tend to lose their joyfulness. Like, our favourite people. We spend time with them, too much time with them, then they lose we tend to get bored with them. Maybe, I don't know, do you? I love my children a lot, but after a 10-hour car ride, then they're not looking so lovely. So that's also an experience that we have. So if the person was a direct cause of happiness, then that shouldn't fade. There's something else happening there. That's what this evidence is suggesting. Then also we can compare like affluent countries to, developing countries that are poorer. And you go to visit developing countries and you might meet people who seem much happier than the people you see here. So that's a common experience. So if affluence and possessions were a true cause of happiness, then they should be necessarily less happy than we are according to our GDP. So that also doesn't bear out. And some developed countries have higher rates of suicide, for example, and other problems that poorer countries don't have so much. So again, these are things that I encourage you to investigate and be skeptical about. I was thinking last night an interesting thought experiment. Maybe we can do that if we've got time. So so maybe just close your eyes and just visualize this. So this thought experiment is just thinking about all the things that you want, or all the things that you think would make you happy. And imagine that you had them. So it's just a short thought experiment. So, for example, you might think of having a beautiful house, for example, or 2 or 3, and in a beautiful location, beautiful garden, furniture. This is just me. You might have other things that you might not want a beautiful house at all. Then you can think of nice cars and nice clothes and beautiful family, partner, children, extended family, friends, nice dog, nice cat, etc. So your idea of what would make you happy, all the things that you ever thought would make you happy. So you have a nice healthy body, attractive appearance, nice straight teeth. I've always wanted to have straight teeth. So just visualize having all those things that you've ever thought. Thought of an object, I really wish I could have that, so I'd be much happier. Like not having to go to work, for example. So you have enough money that you don't have to go to work. You're able to travel wherever you want to go. So just visualize that for a minute. That kind of existence where you have everything that you've ever wanted. So the way we think about these things, we have this feeling that if I had all of these things, then I would be happy. So we can use it, doing this kind of thought experiment, we can test that. So can you imagine that you would be completely happy having these things? I mean, is that how it feels to you? Or can you imagine that, or you can ask yourself the question, would it be possible not to be happy if you had all of those things? So I'm not sort of telling you what the conclusion of this meditation would be. I'm just saying this is just a thought experiment you can conduct in your mind. Like, what would it be like to have all those things? And would it be possible to be unhappy if you had all those things? Or would you definitely be completely happy? So I was thinking about this yesterday, doing that sort of thought experiment. And I was trying to imagine, would it be possible to be unhappy if you had everything? And then I was thinking about, some of the rich and famous people. And I was remembering the comedian Robin Williams, Robin Williams, who committed suicide. And then I was thinking, well, I'm guessing that he probably had pretty much everything that he wanted, but was, unhappy enough to commit suicide. And apparently one of the reasons he committed suicide because he had a health condition called Lewy body. It's a form of Parkinson's, and they said that was affecting his state of mind and leading him to depression. But also then I was reading about his life, and he had a long history of alcoholism, using a lot of alcohol and drugs and things. So then it kind of makes you wonder, if you have all of those things, and apparently had, according to the internet, what I was reading is between $50 and $100 million his estate was worth when he passed away. So I'm guessing he didn't really want for anything. He pretty much could buy anything that he wanted. Apparently he had 50 bicycles or something in his estate. I'm not sure why he had 50 bicycles. So anyway, to me that's some indication that there's no guarantee that these things will bring you happiness. That it is actually possible to be miserable even though you have all of those things. Yeah. So I'm not, criticizing him at all. It's just an interesting thought experiment, I think, to conduct and investigate an idea like this, to establish whether these things are guaranteed causes of happiness. And there's many other examples of people who have everything and are not happy. So again, that's like a clue or an evidence that there's no guaranteed relationship between having lots of external things and having happiness. So then, so just stop me and ask questions as I go along. All right, I've got about 10 minutes left. Or maybe we'll stop there for a minute for questions. Did anybody have any questions or thoughts about that before I go on? Yes. You go first.
I was just wondering, would you describe happiness as more a thought or a feeling?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah. What is happiness? Yeah. So for me, I would say happiness is whatever somebody calls happiness themselves. So when you say I'm happy, then you're experiencing happiness. But even that is problematic, because from the Buddhist point of view, what we call happiness is actually a form of dissatisfaction. So you've probably heard of, it's called the suffering of change. So a good example is that on a hot day, when your body's feeling really hot, and you go to the beach and you dive into the water and you feel blissful sort of relief. And then you swim around for a while. After a while you start getting cold, so you go back and lie in the sun. After, when the sand is beautiful and warm, you lie there. After a while you get too hot. So what we normally call happiness is actually, in the Buddhist presentation, again, something you don't have to agree with, check up, is what we call the suffering of change. So it's just changing from one state to the other. So I guess another example is you meet a favourite person and you're so happy to see them, you start talking, and after a while you might, 3 hours later, and they're still talking, okay, I want to go now. So, that kind of change. Eating your favourite food, eventually it's going to become unsatisfactory. Yeah. So anyway, but happiness, generally I think we can use that definition in our discussion. It's what we call happiness, what you call happiness, what I call happiness. Yeah. So it's different for everyone. You happy with that definition? Sorry, I think someone else had a comment down here. Sorry, can you speak a bit louder? Yes. Another good question. Yes. Is being happy why we do Buddhism? Yeah. So, yeah, very good question. So I think one way you could answer that is by saying within Buddhist tradition, and I think other traditions, there's various levels of motivation. So I think initially we're interested in spiritual practice because we're feeling dissatisfaction in our lives and we want to relieve that. So that's a legitimate reason for engaging in spiritual practice. And the first thing the Buddha taught was that this existence is unsatisfactory. So that's the experience we have. So seeking to be free of that dissatisfaction is entirely legitimate. However, we can do better than that. And so then there's another level of motivation where we're seeking to develop ourselves in order to benefit others. And the power of that, or why that's regarded to be a more powerful or more effective approach, is the idea that by overcoming this self-centeredness, we immediately alleviate or remove the cause of a lot of our problems indirectly. So the idea is if you were to focus your mind on helping others, then indirectly, as a result of that, then a lot of your own problems would disappear because those problems are arising from a self-centered attitude. Yeah. So from that point of view, then just seeking happiness for yourself is somewhat problematic. Yeah. And another answer to that question is that seeking happiness is in itself a problem. So because there's a mind which is feeling like what I am now is unhappy, and then there's this state of happiness over there that I want to achieve, and that dynamic is in itself problematic. So the idea is one of accepting how you are now, rather than trying to make things different. Yeah. 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 Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 Another good point. Yeah. So I think when we do start, firstly, try to meditate and place our mind and try and make it still, then one thing that we commonly experience is that our mind can suddenly seem much more sort of busy and disturbed. And this is, like the meditation teachers say, that we shouldn't be too bothered by this, because actually we can see that as a positive sign, because we're becoming more aware of what's going on in our mind, which can be quite an uncomfortable thing, because you realize that there's all these thoughts going on in your mind which you may not have been aware of. And your mind is constantly jumping from one attachment, aversion, I like this and I don't like that. And so there's a lot going on in your mind which you may not have been aware of.
And you have to stay there, don't you? I mean, that's where the objects come in, because the external objects are quick fix.
Yeah. But the idea is that we keep returning to that neutral object, because the neutral object doesn't bring up those feelings of attachment and aversion and doesn't disturb the mind. So it is actually a holiday for your mind when you can get your mind to rest on that object. Yeah.
I think it's the idea of pursuing happiness, but I think
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we all experience some kind of difficulties when we engage in spiritual practice, and it's not going to be immediately blissful. And again, I think that's why it's important to understand the reasons why we do it. So if we're just doing it because it feels good, then we're going to stop doing it when it doesn't feel good. But if we can see the reasons, if we can see that something like selfishness or attachment is causing suffering, and we understand the reasons for that, then we can persevere with the difficulties of the practice to overcome, afflictive emotions like attachment and anger, anxiety, etc. Yeah. Mm.
Is it more focused like because you might get like a repeated practice and eventually there'll be one like moment of clarity, I guess?
Mm.
It's actually cosmic.
Yeah, I think that's yes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. So you're saying that you might have a moment of clarity when you're doing the practice, and then that inspires you. I think that's what you're saying. So you have that moment of clarity, then you can see how your mind can be clear, and that inspires you to push through the more difficult parts. So I think that's also true. So you see that your mind is capable of having those very clear moments, and you think, wow, that's amazing, so I'd like to do that again. So you keep doing the practice. Yes?
How would you relate contentment to the happiness that you describe?
Yeah.
Relationship of contentment and happiness?
Yeah, so I think that contentment is also an important point. It gets back a bit to what I was saying before about how maybe striving for happiness can be a lack of contentment. So maybe we need to relax that kind of striving and just sort of accept how things are and find happiness in that way. So rather than feeling I've got to change all these things about myself, just by sort of accepting things as they are, then that can actually pacify a lot of the afflictions or the afflictive emotions that are coming up. Is that what you mean? Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. Okay, so we're sort of out of time now, but we can continue this interesting discussion next week. Yes, sorry, before we go.
Sort of comment, I guess.
Yeah.
I would have thought a fair bit of work's been done on happiness from all different aspects. I'm not talking about Buddhist
Yeah.
thinking, just general happiness. And I would have thought that, generally speaking, there's a number of things that need to happen before happiness can blossom. Like you're not starving,
Yeah.
you're out of a thunderstorm, you've got a roof over your head.
Yeah.
Sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
You go up that chain.
Yes.
Happy. That's sort of one aspect. So there's all of the things you need
Yeah.
before you can be happy. It doesn't make you happy.
Yeah.
Just they're precursors.
Like a basis. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I think there's another bunch of work that's sort of shown that interaction between people and relationships, again, non-Buddhist, because I know Buddhist sort of pushes above that, the happiest people are the ones in communities where people care about each other and
Yeah.
good relationships
Mm.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting question, when you're talking about not getting attached,
Mm.
is the level of happiness above that.
Mm.
So what I'm postulating is there's various levels of happiness, and the one that you'll be taking us to would be above the one that's generally accepted as the happiest people.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with all of that, what you've said. Yeah, so there's definitely degrees of happiness, and I think we all would agree that there's certain things, basic requirements that we need, like enough food, for example, in order to be happy. And as you said, relationships with people around us. It's very difficult to be happy entirely alone, I would say. But again, yeah.
So that work has shown that people are very happy in good relationships.
Yes.
That's where they call it quits. They're not
Yeah.
attached.
Yeah. Yeah, so then I guess the question is can you go further than that?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, often we have, like I would say I have a good relationship with my wife, but it's certainly not perfect. We still argue, and, there's still times, when I'm not happy with her and she's not happy with me. So then the question, I guess, is can you improve on that? And so that's what we're investigating, I think, yeah.
What I'm trying to do is push you to the logic.
Yeah.
To say that improving on that is necessary. And the only logic I can see is that relationship's not permanent. It's probably too late to do this.
Yeah, well, impermanence is certainly one problem. And also there's the idea that if you can improve, you can be happier and remove all the dissatisfaction, then why wouldn't you? And again, also the idea that by developing these kind of positive qualities, that you're more qualified to help other people who are suffering, which is also a powerful argument, I think, for developing your mind. Anyway, sorry we're out of time, so we'll stop there. And thank you very much for listening, and maybe for homework you could just investigate whether external objects are a reliable source of happiness or not. Thanks.